all right, a week later, I feel way better.
Good. Dude, whatever's been going around, it is like taking people down.
Yeah,
and it lingers.
We were doing our best to like power through, right? But
Yeah.
it just was not going smoothly last week. Anyways, back at it, and we're finally going to talk about the tractor behind us. Is John Deere 3020. And, you know, the background on this tractor, we bought it back 2016, 2017. And it was funny because we drove it. It was a local tractor. We drove it down the road. And as soon as we pulled into the yard, it died on us. And it's the stuff you can't make up.
Well, and was it a single owner before?
Yeah, so that's kind of
You knew the
owner.
So
Yep.
I kind of had some sentimental and special.
Yeah, we bought it off an estate.
memories.
And so, especially for Dad, because I couldn't figure out, like, you know, even when we bought it, I knew we weren't going to use it a lot, but it did have the loader. But I couldn't figure out why Dad was really adamant about like, hey, I want to buy this. And then later I got it out of him. He remembers when the prior owner bought it new. And he said that was the second biggest tractor in the neighborhood. And he's like, I was a kid. And he's like, I remember when he bought it new. And
So what year is the tractor?
I ran the serial number. It's either 66 or 67. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember that. And so that makes sense. Dad would have been like 6, 7 at the time.
Yeah.
So it kind of made sense.
Yeah.
And you know what? So it's really cool. The tractor dies, which immediately I'm like, oh, come on. But then we powered through. We ended up having to have the injection pump rebuilt, remanned, and then we had the injectors remanned. And then what was the cause of the initial problem was the diesel tank was actually full of rust. So we actually updated to a poly tank, a plastic tank, which was really nice. And we didn't put a whole lot of hours on it throughout the years, but it was nice for what we needed it for. Yep. It's just usually kind of demands we have is either we need something smaller or we need something bigger. And then a couple years ago, we updated to the cat skid loader. And then once we updated to the cat skid loader, I don't blame any of the guys, but that became the new crowd favorite. So the last couple of years here, we just seen it sit. And me and Dad have been going back and forth. And I just was kind of like, you know, I don't want to see it sit and waste away. I want to see someone else use it because we actually put a lot of time in it. And then finally, for the first time this last year, Dad kind of, you know, same thing, kind of agreed. And so now what's really kind of funny, the township we live in, it was bought and purchased in this township. The tractor's gone from the first owner, which was down the road to the mile about a north. Then it came here, and then now it's going down the road about a mile to the west. Yeah. And so it's kind of funny. That kind of led to a new problem. What the new problem was, we knew we wanted to sell it, and then anytime you sell a piece of equipment, you want to make sure it's going in good shape, or at least we do. But then,
especially to a neighbor.
That was kind of the new
do.
problem. Now it's going to a neighbor that we know is going to use it, and also we want to make sure everything is good to go.
Yeah.
So earlier in the month, we brought the tractor in the shop, and we knew the hydraulic cylinders for the loader was actually starting to weep a little bit. But then when we got it here and got it on the concrete shop floor, we kind of found out how bad they were actually leaking.
Okay.
It's the downside with concrete. Gravel will hide a lot of oil leak.
So does it actually, when it's leaking, does it actually leak from the cylinders?
Yeah, so when you're dealing with hydraulic cylinders, you have what they call the barrel and the ram. The ram is the shiny part, which I don't have exposed. Thought we did. And then the barrel is actually the part that the ram goes actually into.
Yeah.
Well, at least you guys tried.
Yeah. Well, what do? You know, you just try hard. Our friend Martin actually...
Who you've used and abused. Yes, go ahead.
That poor guy, man. He can't get an easy project around here. Our really good friend Martin that just spent like hours welding up a fuel tank for a 5020. This was his other little side project. He started taking the cylinders off, and him and Dad were going back and forth, and they're like, yeah, this shouldn't be too bad. And anytime you use those words in the shop, it seems like it just goes way worse.
Yep.
So step one, we get the cylinders off, we throw them on the bench, and Martin starts tearing into them. And what you really want to do is actually, when you're doing this, there is on all these cylinders, sometimes they bolt together, sometimes they have snap rings that hold them together. So you were actually here last night, and you got the pins out last night, and you cracked the oil line, so the cylinder was actually already empty of oil.
Yeah, they're mostly empty of oil. There'll still be a little in there, but...
Okay. Now, what is the point of the bolt?
The bolt is just to hold it steady. You have to drive that head in order to get that internal snap ring out. And then it's much easier pulling things apart when you got one end anchored down.
And different functions like that. This one actually had the snap rings, so we started taking the snap rings out. Okay, so right now, step one is clean everything up, but eventually you're gonna be pulling the snap ring right here, right?
Yep, that'll be, once we get it cleaned up, the first thing we'll do is take the snap ring off. fairly heavy snap ring, so it's probably not going to come easily.
What are you actually tapping on? Oh, you got this side. You got this side off.
Yeah, this side loose. Okay. And then we'll have to drive the head down into there, and there'll be an internal snap ring inside to pull out. Next thing we're gonna do is drive this head back, and hopefully this one's not corroded in place.
Go to town.
That one actually went fairly easily.
Why do you gotta drive the head back?
Because if you, once I get this wiped out here, there'll be a snap ring on the inside.
Really?
And
Okay.
that's what actually holds the cylinder together, is this internal snap ring. And the external snap ring, all it does is prevent that from going back. Because if that head goes beyond the port there, then there's just a direct path for oil to come out. Now on these cylinders, this is the tricky part, is to dig that. It's a round snap ring, and you kind of got to dig it out of there with a pick. And this is where it gets frustrating. Find the end of the snap ring. I don't know if you can get in there with the camera or not. But here I kind of got kind of a hook, trying to get a hook on underneath it, and it actually came out pretty good.
Might have a little luck.
And then we'll just work that ring out. Now the important thing is, when we reassemble this, we got to remember to put these two rings back on onto the rod first. Otherwise, we'll have it all together, and there'll be no way to get these rings back on. And ask me how I know. Okay, now we can pull it all apart. And this is actually packing in there.
Does that look good, or does that look old? Or does that look like what you expect?
Let's get this flipped around here. So on this cylinder here, our piston seals are actually what's called packing. What they are is it's a stack of V-shaped rings, and as they compress, they expand. And right here is the wear ring, like we were talking about earlier. And as you can see, it's just a plastic ring. It's a hard plastic, and then that takes the side load. If a cylinder's not pushing or pulling straight on, there's a side load, and then this is what prevents the piston from being forced into the cylinder wall.
We got the actual ram out of the cylinder. We got everything tore apart, and then that allowed us to actually dismantle the seal packs, is what they call it.
So I think next thing, we'll probably have to get an impact and take that off.
Take the nut off.
Yep.
Gotcha. Do the nuts normally come off that easy?
No, they're usually on there pretty hard, and oftentimes they're Loctited. This one had a nylon lock nut. So
Do you replace the nut?
it's a good practice too.
That's a way of saying don't be a cheap farmer? Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure how old this loader is, but I'm guessing probably at least 40, 50 years, and that nylon deteriorates over time, and it won't be a lock nut once that's deteriorated. So this piston is it's a multi-piece piston, and this first section here is what actually compresses the packing, and then it also contains the wear ring that we took off earlier, so that would just snap on like that. And now with this packing, this first is gonna get compressed together pretty good, but this first ring is gonna be flat on the bottom, but the top is V-shaped. And then the subsequent rings are V-shaped on the bottom that nest into there, and then they're also V-shaped on the top. And then the top ring will be just the opposite, where it'll be flat on top, and then it'll accept the V on the bottom. And then, as you know, since they're triangle shaped like that, and as they compress, they will expand. And then we also have an O-ring in the center here to keep oil from bypassing through the threads. And then this is the head here that we started out with, or that we drove in earlier. So we'll have on the outside there's an O-ring and a backing ring. And with anytime you're replacing a cylinder, the pressure from the cylinder is going to be pushing this way. So you always want the O-ring closest to the pressure and the backing ring behind it. And then on the inside we have the wiper seal. And then there's kind of a tan colored band in there. And then that's going to be the rod seal. And then on this particular cylinder, there's no wear band in the head.
So is that just a seal?
Yep, this is just the wiper seal, and all the wiper seal does is just, like its name says, it just wipes the rod off before it goes back in, gets rid of the dust and dirt. Some of these are built differently, some snap in. This one has a steel ring around it, kind of like a wheel seal and a hub. But they are not the easiest to pull out sometimes. Sometimes you can kind of collapse them in a little bit and makes them getting them out a little easier. Just kind of a word of caution, if you're doing something like this, you gotta be careful not to scrape this inside bore here, because that's where the rod goes against, and then a scrape on there could potentially damage the chrome on the rod.
Victory.
Yep, just a little seal. Taking out the rod seal. There's not a real elegant way of doing this, but basically just piercing the seal and prying it out. Well, these are called a U seal, and one side it's going to be flat. The other side there's a real narrow slot in here. And that slot always goes toward the pressure, because then as the pressure increases in the cylinder, it forces the two lips of the seal apart, and then it forms a tighter seal. Okay, and these are just the head seals and what seals between the head and the cylinder bore. So we just got an O-ring, and then there's a backing ring behind it, which is just another rubber ring.
Is that like a square packing ring?
Yeah, it's actually got,
Okay,
it's
like
a little
little
hard
oil
to see.
lip seal. Hang on, I think I get this.
It's actually a curved surface in there to mate up against the O-ring.
Oh, okay.
And it just provides support to the O-ring so that the O-ring doesn't start extruding from the pressure. And then some of these are flat and some are contoured like this one is. So I got the packing rings out, and then like we talked about before, you have your top and bottom ring each have a flat side on them, and then the center ones are V-shaped in the bottom, and then they're also V-shaped on the top there, and then they just nest together. Rings are actually made out of compressed leather, and they still make them that way now. Oftentimes they're combinations of leather and urethane. They'll actually alternate rings, so you'll have a leather ring and then a urethane ring and then another leather ring, and there's and I don't remember the exact reason off the top of my head, but they have different properties, and I think they just use the combination of the materials to kind of get the best of both worlds.
So step one, we get the cylinders off, we throw them on the bench, and Martin starts tearing into them. And what you really want to do is actually, when you're doing this, there is, on all these cylinders, sometimes they bolt together, sometimes they have snap rings that hold them together, and different functions like that. This one actually had the snap rings, so we started taking the snap rings out. We got the actual ram out of the cylinder. We got everything tore apart, and then that allowed us to actually dismantle the seal packs, is what they call it. And Martin started ordering up the seal packs. And
So is that when they're leaking, is that what you're assuming is wrong? Is that the seals have gone out on it? Or are there other things that could be causing it?
So actually, when a cylinder leaks, it could be a lot of things.
Okay.
Most of the time, the most common thing is just the seals have gotten old.
Especially when it's been sitting like it had been.
Yeah, and actually some of it's just wear, you know.
Sure.
The seal's always encased in oil, so actually it always kind of has like, you know, a lubricant. And, but they do just kind of get old when they're talking about 50 plus years.
So is there any place that you like buying seals, or any place that if Farmer Bob's doing this himself, they'd recommend, or something like this, is it just easiest to go to Deere?
It depends. I mean, you know, Deere is probably gonna always have good quality seals.
Yeah. It is the tough thing with Deere, isn't it? Like, you pay
Yeah.
a premium, but you really don't get bad parts from Deere.
McMaster-Carr has a pretty decent selection of seals, and then the other company I get them through is called Hercules, and they got pretty much Hercules has pretty much everything.
So the cone behind you, it's not a dunce cap. That's actually for measuring O-rings.
Yep.
Is there a big, what do you think the price difference if you went from Deere to Hercules is? Do you think it's 2 to 1 or twice as much?
It's gonna be probably half the price of Deere.
So when you go through a company like Hercules or McMaster-Carr, are you sourcing each seal out individually, or do they come as a kit? Or
Hercules does sell them by kits. McMaster-Carr, you're gonna have to order them individually.
okay.
They're pretty easy to do. They're mainly in nominal sizes, you know. But then there's also metric ones. So if like a newer John Deere loader would have a metric rod and a metric bore to it, where this one is an imperial. Like, the main thing is, you know, you want your inside diameter, your outside diameter, and your heights. One thing that kind of trips people up if they don't know any better is, like, on your inside seals, there actually has we'll just show on the outside. See how those O-rings will wiggle back and forth?
Yep.
There needs to be a little bit of a gap there. You don't want those fully filled, otherwise that seal has nowhere to expand, and then they won't work properly, or else they get sheared off in assembly. And a lot of them are based off of O-ring sizes. So, like, well, just take this O-ring here for example. This cone's for measuring them, so you got different diameters, and we'll find the one. We'll go through and find the notch that it matches best with. So we got down to like a 16th inch, 1/8 inch. I think that's like 5/32 and 3/16 and quarter. But don't quote me on those. But yeah, so like here, this one matches up best with this notch. So that's a 200 series. And then we just put the ring over the cone until it settles into the one that it fits on. And sorry, I'm making a mess here. So this is a 212 O-ring, and then that 212, that's kind of like an SAE number, that's universal. And then, like, say, like, for example, on this one where we have an O-ring and a backing ring, if that was a 212 O-ring, it's also going to be a 212 backing ring. And then usually the suppliers, when you order them, they give dimensions for the groove that they go into.
Gotcha.
So if you pull it apart and the seal's old and cracked and falls apart and you can't measure it, this calipers is made for measuring for seals. So there's it works like a regular caliper. You can do your outside dimensions, your inside dimensions, and then you can also do inside
bores.
dimensions or thicknesses and such. There's also a set of pins that can go in here so that you can put those pins in, and then you can measure how deep the groove is on the inside. And then this is kind of the handiest part. So if you want to measure a groove on the inside, you can, with those two little bird beaks or whatever you want to call them, you can reach inside something and measure the width of a groove, where something like on here you wouldn't be able to physically get it inside. But generally they're going to be in quarter-eighth inch increments. They're going to be a nominal number for the most part. There's a few exceptions, but
No, that's cool. I learned a lot right there. I'm the type of guy, me personally, I usually would just go to Deere.
Yeah.
But then my attitude's always like, what I save in time makes up for the additional pay. Like, it's easy. Where this applies to me, because that's why I think it's kind of cool that I'm learning, is I definitely have worked on stuff that there's no instruction manual.
Yeah.
There's no rule book. There's no nothing. And hence that right there. So you're just winging it, and then because I sat there with the parts guy, and you're looking up the specs, and it's just a flat screen, and it's a non-colored picture. It's just black and white, right? And they're okay. What do we think? Well, this is the measurements. Where at least if you were here with tools like that, you could actually measure it out, and then you have more information to give the parts guy.
Yeah.
A lot of people complain about horrible parts people. I will tell you, a lot of times your parts guy is as good as the information you give them.
yeah,
And,
exactly.
So if you can sit there and okay, I got this, or it's a 212 ring. All right, at least they got something to go off of.
Yeah.
What I was getting at is, my world, a lot of times I'd send a text message off to the parts guy. I won't think nothing of it. The parts guy at John Deere is going to text me when it's in. Boom, we just go pick it up. It's done. It's over with. But that being said, I run into those scenarios where, hey, there's no rule book. There's no instructions. We don't know what brand it is. Nothing like that exists because it's old and rusty or something like that. It is really interesting because, now you know how to kind of use the cone.
Yeah.
And Martin gave me this cone a couple years ago, and I truly have never used it. But watching him tonight, it's like, hey, that's what that's for. Cool.
Yep. And then one other thing is O-rings are always based off of the inside diameter.
Oh, really? Okay. What about
so-
thickness then?
Okay, so O-rings are always based off of the inside dimension. And so there are charts that will convert it from, like I say you want a 1 inch inside diameter O-ring. And you can look on the charts and they will tell you what the numbers are for, the different thicknesses. And now with the thickness, if you measure this with a caliper, it's going to be a little bit bigger than the nominal thickness. That's because there's some squeeze, there's some squeeze built into it. So you can make your grooves to a nominal size, and then there's a little bit of pressure on the O-ring so it'll seal.
The other common thing that can cause one to leak is actually if some debris or some junk hits the ram, and then you have a nick in it, that can cause it to leak. So there actually kind of is a lot of things that.
And were both sides leaking?
So there's 4 cylinders on it.
Okay.
3 out of the 4 were leaking, and then we decided let's just do the 4th just in case.
That was nice. Yep.
Oh. So actually, a couple days go by, Martin orders all the seals. I mean, I was actually really impressed. So I've never actually, I know he's done it, and then actually we've rebuilt a number of cylinders around here. It's actually kind of one of Dad's favorite hobbies. But we typically would just go to the manufacturer and just order a rebuild kit or a seal kit from it. Martin actually orders all the seals individually because they're way cheaper.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting, yeah. But then we ran into an issue when we got the seals and we started putting it together. Martin shows up and he's like, oh, this will be pretty good, or this will go together pretty smoothly. And immediately I'm like, okay, we'll just go with the flow, right? And then I look over and
How about that?
good. If we got to this point in the video, I have to explain a little bit. A couple things are going on here. Number one, I originally thought when we started this, we were going to do the tear down of the cylinders and then we were going to do the installation all in one video. But then when my friend Martin here started explaining in depth how we measure seals, I thought that information was really, really interesting for the select people out there that want to know that information.
And so as we got to this point in the video, I thought, okay, let's split this. Let's make this into 2 videos. That way it's going to be easier for people to digest. Probably also easier to explain. It's probably just going to make the whole project easier. And so we're going to split this into 2 videos. This upcoming weekend, you should see us going back together, because actually when we start going back together with this project, it gets kind of funny, at least for me. The other thing I just want to say, sorry if this video got out a little late. Thank you for watching. I've had a blast. I've had an absolute blast putting these things together. They just do take a little bit of time. Last week I was getting over a pretty intense cold and kind of knocked me on my butt. Then we started working. This is the time of the year where we actually usually do a lot of work either late at night or early in the morning. And so this past weekend we were actually doing a bunch of trucking. And so I say all that just to say, sorry this one kind of came out on Tuesday instead of Monday, but thanks for watching. I've had an absolute blast working with my sister Dawn putting these together. This one got a little more in depth as Martin explains how he actually measures all the O-rings, but there actually is a lot of knowledge out there for some people, because I've been there where you start working on this stuff and hey, there's no parts diagrams. Anyways, like I said, thanks for watching. We're going to do the reinstallation of the cylinders here in the next video, and yeah.